consider the possibility of something like a civilization in the past, we should expect it to be completely different from us.
Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization.
A single stone block in Lebanon weighs 1,650 tons. That is heavier than 4 fully loaded Boeing 747s.
Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever quarried in human history, the largest stones that were lifted, stacked, and transported in human history, and the largest stone columns in all of classical history.
3 more blocks, each weighing 800 tons, were cut from a quarry, moved nearly a kilometer uphill, and lifted 23 feet into the air, placed with the precision of a surgeon by someone, nobody knows who.
The trilithon stones, 3 stones, 900 tons apiece. They were moved a half a mile from the quarry. They were lifted and stacked approximately 30 feet off the ground. And when I say stacked, they were perfectly lined up.
The Romans built their greatest temple directly on top of these stones and never wrote a single word about them, not one line. The most documented civilization in history went completely silent on the heaviest construction ever attempted.
This block and another 2 are actually far older than the Roman period and could date back thousands of years.
Which means either they did not know who built it, or they did, and chose not to say.
One way or another, there's some kind of technology evident here of how they were cutting the stone.
To understand why that silence is so disturbing, you first need to understand what is actually sitting in this valley in Lebanon, because most people who visit Baalbek never see the thing that matters most. It is hidden underneath everything else. What you are actually looking at. Most people who hear about Baalbek think of the Roman temples, and the Roman temples are extraordinary. The Temple of Jupiter was the largest ever built by Rome, so massive that the entire Parthenon would fit inside its footprint with room to spare. 6 of its original 54 columns still stand, each one 20 meters tall, their stone entablature soaring 80 feet above the ground. But that is not what we are here to talk about. Underneath those Roman temples, forming the foundation platform on which everything Roman was built, is something the Romans did not create. A layer of stone construction so massive, so perfectly engineered, and so completely undocumented that it has been quietly destroying every conventional theory about ancient civilization for over a century. This is the trilithon, 3 limestone blocks, each one 62 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet wide, each one weighing between 750 and 800 tons. Placed side by side, 23 feet above the ground, fitted together so precisely that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them.
Each of the stones were quarried 2 miles away and put perfectly into place with such precision that you can't even put a credit card or a needle in between those massive blocks.
Think about what it would take to do that today. The largest mobile land crane on Earth, the Liebherr LTM 11200-9.1, can lift approximately 1,200 tons under ideal, carefully controlled conditions. NASA's Vehicle Assembly Building crane, one of the strongest in the world, could not lift a single trilithon block. To move an 800-ton stone from the quarry to the temple site and raise it 23 feet into the air, you would need the most specialized heavy lift equipment on the planet, a team of engineers, weeks of preparation, and a flat, reinforced surface to work from. The builders of the trilithon did it without any of that. And they did it 3 times. But here is where it gets truly mind-bending. The 3 trilithon blocks are not the largest stones at Baalbek. They are not even close. The stones that were never delivered. About 900 meters from the temple complex, slightly downhill, is the quarry where the Baalbek stones were cut. And sitting in that quarry, cut and shaped and ready to be moved, are 3 blocks that make the trilithon look modest. The first is called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It weighs over 1,000 tons. It has been sitting in this quarry since antiquity, one end still partially attached to the bedrock, the last cut never completed. Local legend says a pregnant woman once promised to reveal the secret of how to move it, if only the people of the village would feed her until she gave birth. She ate, she gave birth, and she took the secret to her grave. The stone has not moved. The second is called the Stone of the South. It was rediscovered in the 1990s, buried under sediment, forgotten for centuries. It weighs 1,240 tons. The third is called the Forgotten Stone, found in 2014 by the German Archaeological Institute. It had been completely buried, unknown to anyone, for an unknown length of time. When they uncovered it, they found the largest cut stone ever discovered anywhere on Earth, 1,650 tons. 3 stones, in a quarry, cut and shaped, but never delivered, never used, left exactly where they were. Now ask yourself this: if the people who built the trilithon could move 800-ton blocks nearly a kilometer and lift them 23 feet into the air, why did they stop? What happened to a project so ambitious that even 1,600-ton stones were considered too small? What ended this? That question does not have a comfortable answer, but it is the question that reveals what Baalbek really is. The silence that should terrify you. Here is something you need to sit with for a moment. The Romans loved to brag. They documented everything. We have Roman records of how they built aqueducts, how they constructed the Colosseum, how they laid road systems across 3 continents. Roman engineers wrote technical manuals. Roman administrators filed reports. Roman historians recorded the great achievements of Roman construction for posterity. The Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek was the largest temple the Roman Empire ever built. It would have been their greatest engineering achievement. And yet, not one Roman document mentions how the foundation stones were moved. Not one Roman engineer wrote about the trilithon. Not one Roman historian recorded who cut these blocks or how they were placed. This is not a gap in the record. This is a hole where a record should be. And there is another detail that researchers have been quietly discussing for years. When you examine Roman construction, you find what is called the Roman foot, a standard unit of measurement embedded into the dimensions of every Roman structure. Roman engineers built to this standard everywhere in the empire. It appears in temples, aqueducts, roads, and public buildings from Britain to Egypt. The trilithon stones do not contain the Roman foot. Their dimensions do not correspond to any Roman unit of measurement. They were not designed by Roman engineers. They were not built to Roman standards. They were already there when the Romans arrived. Think about what that means. The Romans built the largest temple in their empire on top of a foundation they did not create, did not understand the origins of, and apparently chose not to question publicly. They arrived at this site, found an existing stone platform of impossible scale, and simply built on top of it. As if using a table someone else had left behind. Who left the table? How long had it been there? And why did every civilization that came to this valley, Canaanite, Phoenician, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, treat this specific spot as sacred without any of them claiming responsibility for its most extraordinary feature? The answer to that starts not in Rome, not in Greece, but 11,000 years ago, on a hill in Lebanon that nobody can seem to stop building on. 11,000 years of the same sacred hill. Here is a fact that archaeology has established and almost nobody talks about. People have been living on the hill at Baalbek for approximately 11,000 years. The earliest confirmed evidence of human settlement at the site dates to around 9,000 BCE. That is before the pyramids, before Stonehenge, before any city in Mesopotamia, before agriculture had spread across the Near East. The people living on this hill 11,000 years ago were among the earliest settled communities in the world, and every civilization that came after them, across 11,000 years of history, chose the same hill. The Chalcolithic people built here. The Bronze Age Canaanites built here. The Phoenicians built their greatest temple complex here. Alexander the Great arrived in 334 BC, named it Heliopolis, City of the Sun, and his successors built here. Julius Caesar made it a Roman colony in 47 BC. The Romans built their largest temple here. Christian emperors converted it into churches. Medieval Islamic dynasties turned it into a fortress. 11,000 years. Every culture, the same hill. Why this hill? The Beke Valley is long and wide and fertile. There are many hills, but for 11,000 years, humans have treated this specific location as the place where heaven and earth meet, as the place where the divine is closer than anywhere else. The most likely answer is that something was already here, something that the first settlers found and treated as sacred, that the next settlers inherited and extended, that the next civilization built on top of, that the Romans inherited and used as their foundation. Literally and figuratively, a sacred tradition stretching back to before any written record that explains it. And at the center of that tradition, from at least the Bronze Age and possibly much earlier, the stones, the ones no one can explain, the ones no civilization claimed to build, the ones that have been there so long that by the time writing was invented, everyone had already forgotten who made them. But forgotten does not mean irrelevant. Because the God this place was built for tells you exactly what kind of power was being invoked here, and it is not what you think. The God this was built for, and why that matters. The name Baalbek comes from the Phoenician. Baal means Lord. Bka is the valley, but the god who was worshipped here, the specific deity whose presence made this hill sacred for thousands of years before the Romans arrived, was not a gentle god. Baal-Hadad was the storm god, the god of thunder and lightning and rain. In a world where agriculture was the difference between life and death, the god who controlled rainfall was the most powerful being in the universe. More important than gods of wisdom, more important than gods of war. Because if the rain does not come, everyone dies, armies included. The worship of Baal at this site was not quiet prayer. Ancient sources describe rituals that historians have spent generations trying to fully understand. Ceremonies involving fire, sacrifice, sacred sexuality, and mystery rites that initiates were forbidden from describing to outsiders. The god of storms was invoked through means designed to make his power feel physically present. The site itself was designed to amplify that feeling. And now look at what was built to honor him. The heaviest foundation in human history. Stones weighing 800 tons, lifted 23 feet into the air, placed with millimeter precision, forming a platform so permanent and so massive that it has outlasted every empire that ever claimed it. This is what you build when you believe, with absolute conviction, that the being you are honoring is real and present and powerful beyond anything human. You do not build small. You do not build easily. You build something that matches the scale of what you are serving. The trilithon is not just an engineering achievement. It is a theological statement. It says, "What lives here is so powerful that ordinary stone cannot contain it. What lives here requires the heaviest thing we can make." What lived here? What did the first people who came to this valley believe was present in this specific place, powerful enough to justify moving stones that our most advanced technology can barely handle? We do not know. The answer died with the civilization that built it. But the stones remain, and they are still saying what they were built to say, even if we can no longer hear the words clearly. What we can do is look at every serious attempt to explain who built them, and watch each one fall apart. Every theory has a fatal problem. Let's go through every serious theory about how the trilithon was built, and let's be honest about where each one falls apart. The Roman theory is the mainstream position. The Romans moved these stones as part of their construction of the Temple of Jupiter. They used wooden sledges, rollers, ramps, capstans, and pulley systems, technology they demonstrably possessed and used on other projects. The problems are severe. Roman engineers documented their methods on other major projects. They wrote nothing about Baalbek's foundation. The stones do not use the Roman foot. The unfinished quarry stones appear to have been buried under sediment by the time the Romans arrived, which is why the Romans never used them, despite the fact that they were already cut. And the most advanced Roman cranes could lift approximately 6 tons. The trilithon blocks weigh 800 tons each. Roman technology was more than 100 times short of what would have been needed. The Phoenician theory proposes that the pre-Roman inhabitants of the site, the Phoenicians, who worshipped Baal here for centuries before Rome, built the foundation platform. The Phoenicians were sophisticated builders and seafarers with the organizational capacity for large projects. The timing is plausible. The problem is that the Phoenicians, like the Romans, left no record of having built anything at this scale, and their known construction elsewhere does not approach what Baalbek requires. The jump from the largest known Phoenician construction to the trilithon is not a step, it is a leap over a canyon. The Persian theory gained attention when German and Lebanese archaeologists found Persian pottery in the quarry area dating to the 6th and 4th centuries BCE. The Persians were capable imperial builders. Their palace complex at Persepolis is a genuine architectural achievement. But Persepolis is built with stones weighing 1 to 20 tons. Baalbek's stones weigh over 100 times more. The Persian approach to large construction was to use many small blocks precisely fitted. The Baalbek approach was the opposite, fewer blocks of incomprehensible size. And the Persians, like every civilization before and after them, left no record of building Baalbek's foundation. The lost technology theory says that a civilization we have not yet identified, possibly predating the Bronze Age, possibly destroyed or absorbed before written records, built the trilithon using engineering methods that have since been completely lost. This theory is not as fringe as it sounds. We know that major civilizations have collapsed entirely, taking their knowledge with them. The Bronze Age collapse of 1200 BC wiped out entire architectural traditions. A pre-Bronze Age civilization of sufficient sophistication is not prohibited by anything in the geological or archaeological record. The problem is that no physical evidence of this civilization has been found at Baalbek. The Neolithic settlement from 9000 BCE is confirmed, but Neolithic people did not build the trilithon. Between the Neolithic and the first confirmed Bronze Age settlements, there is a period of human occupation at this site whose nature is not clearly established. And then there are the theories that mainstream archaeology declines to engage with, but that large numbers of serious thinkers have raised publicly. Graham Hancock has argued for decades that a technologically advanced civilization existed before the end of the last ice age.
Consider the possibility of something like a civilization in the past. We shouldn't imagine that it's us. We should expect it to be completely different from us, but that it would have achieved certain things. So amongst the clues that intrigue me are those precessional numbers that are found all around the world.
A civilization that was destroyed by the global catastrophes of 12,000 years ago, and whose surviving knowledge was passed to the emerging civilizations of the Near East and Egypt. Under this theory, the trilithon was built by people who inherited or preserved techniques from this earlier civilization. Hancock's arguments have been dismissed by mainstream academia. They have not been refuted. Zecharia Sitchin proposed that the Baalbek platform was built as a landing site, a prepared surface of sufficient strength and flatness to support craft of enormous weight. His reading of Mesopotamian texts identified the builders as the Anunnaki, beings described in Sumerian mythology as having come from elsewhere. This theory has no physical evidence supporting it. It is noted here because it has influenced the popular understanding of Baalbek for decades, and because the alternative, that ordinary ancient humans moved 1,600-ton stones with ropes and wood, has not been satisfactorily demonstrated either. The honest answer is that no theory fully works. Every explanation has a gap. The stones are there. How they got there is still genuinely unknown. But that has not stopped people from trying. For over a century, serious researchers have been digging into this hillside looking for answers, and what they have found has not simplified the mystery. It has deepened it. What modern investigation has actually found. The scientific investigation of Baalbek began seriously in 1898, when Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany visited the site and funded the first major archaeological excavation, which ran until 1904. What those excavations found was the beginning of a puzzle that has only grown more complex with every subsequent decade of work. The first major revelation was scale of time. When the excavation team cleaned and examined the Temple of Jupiter, they found evidence of human settlement at the site going back to the Neolithic period, not the Bronze Age, not the Phoenician period, the Neolithic. People living on this hill potentially 10,000 years ago, long before anyone assumed this site was significant. If the site was occupied 11,000 years ago, and the massive foundation stones were already considered ancient by the time the Romans arrived 2,000 years ago, the timeline of who built them stretches back into a period of human history that we know almost nothing about. In 2004, Lebanese University teamed up with the German Archaeological Institute for a focused excavation of the ancient quarry. What they found added another layer of complexity. Persian pottery fragments, marked with cuneiform writing, dating to the 6th and 4th centuries BCE, confirmed that the Persians were present at the quarry during that period. Were they building, quarrying, studying what was already there? The pottery does not say, but it confirms activity at the quarry nearly 500 years before Rome. German researcher Margaret van Es made one of the more practically useful discoveries when she studied how the megaliths were cut. She found that the ancient builders cut the stones along natural fissures in the rock, following lines of weakness already present in the limestone, rather than cutting against the grain. This technique, she noted, appears in Roman quarrying practice elsewhere in the empire, suggesting the Romans knew and used this method. What it does not explain is how the resulting blocks, once cut, were moved. The most startling modern discovery came when researchers examined the construction techniques of Podium 1, the foundation layer supporting the 6 massive columns that still dominate the skyline. The style and methods of this specific section are virtually identical to Herodian architecture found in Jerusalem. Same alternating pattern of headers and stretchers, same drafted margin stonework, same average course height of 3.6 feet, too specific to be coincidence. This suggests direct involvement of Herodian builders, the same builders responsible for the Western Wall in Jerusalem at Baalbek, which means the Romans imported the most skilled stone builders in the ancient world specifically to work on this site. And perhaps most remarkable of all, the German excavations between 1900 and 1904 found blueprints, not on papyrus, not on clay tablets, architectural plans carved directly into the stone floors of the Great Courtyard, precise floor plans of sections of the hexagonal courtyard, drawn to scale at approximately 1 to 12.6. These were not rough sketches, they were working drawings, the kind of technical documentation that master architects produce before construction begins. Someone planned this with extraordinary precision. Someone knew exactly what they were building and drew it out on stone before they began. That level of pre-construction planning implies an architectural tradition of sophistication equal to anything in the ancient world. The investigation that would most transform our understanding of Baalbek, a full excavation beneath the trilithon to establish when the foundation was actually built, has not yet been done. The Roman structures above it make full excavation logistically and politically complex. The stones that would answer the most important question are still locked inside a hill in Lebanon, waiting. But while we wait for that excavation, let us do the one thing that cuts through every theory and every debate. Let us look at the actual numbers, because the numbers are where conventional explanations go to die. How many people would it actually take? Let us put some numbers on what moving these stones would require, because the numbers are the point where every conventional explanation breaks down. One study of ancient stone transport estimated that moving a 557-ton block across flat ground using the most sophisticated ancient methods available, wooden sledges, capstans, large teams working in coordinated shifts, would require over 500 workers with well-organized mechanical assistance. That is flat ground. The quarry at Baalbek is at a lower elevation than the temple platform. The stones had to go uphill. Modern engineers who have modeled the full problem, moving an 800-ton block 900 meters uphill and lifting it 23 feet into the air, using any technology plausibly available to ancient builders, arrive at estimates ranging from several thousand to 40,000 workers. 40,000 people is larger than most ancient cities. Organizing, feeding, housing, and coordinating 40,000 workers on a single construction task in a mountain valley in Lebanon using Bronze Age logistics is an administrative challenge that rivals running a small country. For the 1,650-ton forgotten stone still in the quarry, the one that was cut and shaped but never moved, the numbers become even more impossible to make work with conventional ancient methods. When archaeologists actually tested ancient transport methods experimentally, the results were not encouraging. Richard Atkinson, a respected archaeologist, attempted to move a replica Stonehenge bluestone, a stone roughly 100 times lighter than the trilithon blocks, uphill using ancient techniques. The moment the stone hit an incline, it slid sideways uncontrollably. In a separate experiment, a replica statue being transported on rollers lost balance, tumbled off, and shattered. Now imagine that experiment with something 800 times heavier, on rocky terrain, 900 meters, uphill. The math does not work. The experiments do not work. And yet the stones are 23 feet in the air, perfectly placed, and have been there for at least 2,000 years. Something moved them. Something placed them. We do not know what. But here is the thing that should bother you more than the engineering. It is not just one civilization that could not explain this. It is all of them. What every civilization knew that we have forgotten. There is a pattern at Baalbek that becomes impossible to ignore once you see it. Every civilization that encountered this site treated it as sacred, not because of what they built there, because of what was already there when they arrived. The Canaanites did not build the trilithon, they worshipped around it. The Phoenicians built their temple on the platform, not knowing who made the platform. Alexander the Great named the site the City of the Sun and treated it as a place of extraordinary spiritual power, without claiming the foundation as a Greek achievement. The Romans built their greatest temple here, and said nothing about the foundation stones. Every single civilization that came to this valley in sequence inherited the site from the one before, treated it as the most sacred place in the region, and built their own structures on a foundation they did not create. And none of them, not one, looked at the trilithon and said, "We built this. We know who built this. Here is how it was done." The silence is not just Roman, it is universal. Every culture that ever stood next to these stones concluded the same thing. We did not do this. Something else did. Whether that something else was a lost human civilization, a people with techniques we have not recovered, or something beyond current categories of explanation. The 11,000-year record of Baalbek is unanimous. The stones were already there, already ancient, already beyond explanation, and they still are. A stone weighing 1,650 tons, cut and shaped and abandoned in a quarry. 3 stones weighing 800 tons each, lifted 23 feet into the air with millimeter precision. 11,000 years of human civilization treating the same hill as sacred. And not one record, in any language, from any culture, explaining who built the foundation or how. The Romans documented everything. They said nothing about this. That silence is the most terrifying thing at Baalbek, because it means even the greatest record keepers in the ancient world looked at what was underneath their temple and could not explain it. So what do you think? Lost civilization? Ancient technology we haven't recovered? Something else entirely? Drop your theory in the comments. I read every single one, and the best ones make it into the next video. Next week, the Bronze Age collapse. In 1200 BC, every major civilization on Earth fell apart within 50 years of each other. Egypt, the Hittites, Mycenae, Babylon, all of them, simultaneously, and nobody has ever fully explained why. Subscribe so you do not miss it. See you then.